Hello, clever people, and welcome to my review for Spider-Man Homecoming. So Spider-Man Homecoming stars Tom Holland as Spider-Man. This is the second film that he's been Spider-Man. First one was Civil War, second one is this, and it basically follows him as he's going through teenage life. As he has a crush in school, as he has to deal with grades, as he has to deal with his aunt who treats him like a mother, all that type of stuff. And while that's happening, there's also another subplot that he's trying to take care of, where Michael Keaton, who plays Vulture, is doing these really weird things with guns, sort of making it so that these special guns have these special abilities that can cause a lot of havoc. So he's trying to stop that while trying to balance his life. And I was quite excited for Spider-Man Homecoming. I mean, the trailers were quite lackluster. The first one was good, but from there they sort of went downhill, and the posters were absolutely atrocious. So I went in with certain expectations that I was like, okay, I'm not really sure what I'd get, but reviews were good, and honestly, I was just excited to finally see a Spider-Man movie that didn't focus on the same exact story, and that is something you can definitely praise Spider-Man Homecoming for. It absolutely is a different Spider-Man movie from what we've gotten before. It's different from The Amazing Spider-Man and The Amazing Spider-Man 2. It's different from the Spider-Man trilogy. I can confidently say that this is a wholly and completely different Spider-Man movie, and that is something I absolutely loved. We got to see a different story, and this story showed something that I've sort of been curious about in the MCU, the Marvel Cinematic Universe. How does a school function, or how does the outside world function while the Avengers are, there and working? And for about 30 minutes of this movie, they focus exactly on that. They focus on this high school that revolves around the world of the Avengers. And for the most part, it's sort of just about them, talking with each other, but it also shows how, Captain America is in certain videos, and how different things happen revolving around the Avengers. They have talks about, MFK, Mary F. Kill, who they would do for certain Avengers characters. And I sort of liked that, just to see this different world, this new look on the Avengers and how they affect everything else going on in that world. Director Jon Watts intentionally tried to make this like a coming-of-age movie, and by focusing on that question for a lot of the time, he brilliantly incorporated coming-of-age in this superhero story, because the two tones intertwined really well. Now, it does have different tonal inconsistencies I'll talk about later, but for the most part, those two tones worked really well. The idea of this coming-of-age story, of a kid just sort of going through high school and trying to survive, and then a kid having to deal with the city and what's going on. And just sort of seeing that was so cool. And Tom Holland, man, he is probably the best Spider-Man, or at least he is my favorite Spider-Man. He perfectly just combines Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, and he also does his completely own different thing. He is just a perfect 15-year-old for this universe, and I'm super glad that they chose him over any other actor, because I think he embodies Super Spider-Man really, really well. And they showed the Spider-Man character in a way that I think a lot of fans will be satisfied with. Honestly, all fans of Spider-Man, I think, will be happy with this movie. It's a great display of the character, it's got a lot of really interesting subplots, and the best part about it, it's extremely entertaining. I had so much fun watching this movie, and the humor, too, helped a lot with that. There were a lot of jokes, and for the most part, a lot of them landed. There were a lot that didn't land, and they were kind of awkward, because they do go for that sitcom, wait 3 seconds so that the audience can laugh, and then continue on with the dialogue. And when I wasn't laughing, and when no one else was laughing, those were awkward. But when people were laughing, it fit perfectly. And it just it flowed just terrifically. Now, Spider-Man Homecoming honestly does have a lot of issues. And probably the biggest issue with this movie is that it really does nothing new at all. It's the same exact structure you've seen in every other Marvel movie. It follows the same exact story. It's really predictable. From the beginning, I could practically predict everything that was going to happen. And that was that wasn't great. Because this year, you've had a lot of creativity in superhero movies. Wonder Woman, not so much. But Logan, you got this dark, gritty tale that we've never really seen before in a superhero movie. And Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. And there's a very different structure. It didn't really have a lot happening in the first half of it or so. And that was very new for a superhero movie, because a lot of superhero movies are just conflict, constantly going forward. And that movie sort of took it back. Unfortunately, Spider-Man Homecoming just sort of goes for the same exact structure, and it does the same exact thing, and it plays it safe way too often. And that was a shame, because this introduction of Spider-Man and the new idea of coming of age in this universe could have lended towards like a really artsy sort of independent feel for the movie. And I feel maybe John Watts was going for that from the end credits scene that felt like they were straight out of an indie movie. But unfortunately, you never got those vibes. And speaking of coming of age, the depiction of high school was absolutely awful in this movie. You've seen it before millions and millions of times. You've got the geeks, you've got the emos, you've got the nerds, and you've got the jocks, and they all end up changing their ways and liking each other in more better, different ways throughout the run of the movie. And that was a shame, because I think that if you could have depicted a more realistic look on high school, that would have been better. But just the way that it was so cliched and honestly just cheesy really brought down the movie. Now let's talk about Michael Keaton as Vulture. This was a very interesting choice for me because Michael Keaton is so well known for playing Batman in the DC universe, and now they're bringing him over to a Marvel movie. And I thought that was very interesting, and I was interested to see what his character would do. And unfortunately, I don't think he was that strong of a villain. In comparison to all the other Marvel villains, he was quite good, but people are saying that his, acting and that him as a villain was really great. I don't see that. I think it's just because Marvel has set this bar so low for their villains to the point that this is considered a good villain, because the acting from him is very flawed. He's just talking and saying his lines, and he was more reserved and laid back, I guess, but the issue is his subplot was very big and upfront, and honestly it felt like a subplot from a different movie, because the rest of it was not quite lighthearted, but it wasn't dark and somber serious like that subplot was, and it just ruined the rest of the movie. And also, you could have shaved off 20 minutes of this movie, because it honestly felt too long. Maybe it's because I saw it at midnight, and I was tired, and I sort of wanted it to be over just so I could go to sleep, but honestly, I think it was too long. I think there was quite a bit that you could have cut off there. It's only 133 minutes, and that's a decent runtime. It's just that I think maybe this should have been an hour and 45-minute movie. You don't need to make every Marvel movie over 2 hours. I just don't really think that's necessary. But in the end of the day, I was really entertained by Spider-Man Homecoming. I found a lot of enjoyment in this movie, and I can confidently say that out of every movie out in theaters right now, I think that this is probably the one that most people will enjoy, and the one that you should probably go to. I'm probably forgetting about a movie, Baby Driver. No, Baby Driver definitely takes precedence over it. And then I heard The Big Sick is great, or The Big Guild is great, or next week, The War for the Planet of the Apes is coming out, which I hear is great. But as of right now, if you've already seen Baby Driver, go check out this movie. I think it will please Spider-Man fans, it will please everybody just going in, and anyone who just wants a fun superhero movie will definitely find a lot of enjoyment in it. I will give Spider-Man Homecoming a 7 out of 10. Alright, that concludes my review for Spider-Man Homecoming. What are your thoughts on this film, or Spider-Man as a character? Comment in the comment section below, and let me know. I'm Robert Burke, and this has been The Clever Critics. Goodbye.